once in a while a plan comes together. It's 10 till noon. It's time for the live stream to start. So I guess every once in a while all the pieces fall into place. I want to see. All right, I got my Bible Bowl team over here. Who's missing? Gia and Zara. Oh, yeah. Okay. As it said in the happenings this week, for those of you that weren't aware of what the Pathfinder group was studying this year for Bible Bowl, it's the books of Joshua and Judges. And I don't know, last year they did the book of John. Which do you guys think was easier? This year? See, I thought the book of John would be easy because it's a gospel and it has all these stories about Jesus that we're already familiar with. And I thought this year would really be hard because it has lots of passages in Joshua and Judges where it says, and the children of Israel took this city and it used to be called blah, blah, blah. And now they called it blah, blah, blah because blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, that's just going to be a nightmare to remember all those names. But it turns out it's easier to memorize all those names than it is to memorize every speech that Jesus made, which was basically the book of John. So the kids I think are enjoying it this time. But there's a lot of information packed into Joshua and Judges. And the way the kids have to learn it is they have to, I'm supposed to circle the flowers here. So that the flowers are still central, but you can see me. There we go. The way they learn for Bible Bowl is if they make it all the way through, they'll have virtually memorized their part of the books of Joshua and Judges. And it's about 5 to 8 chapters, depending on how many verses are in each chapter. So they're memorizing on average about 180 verses. Okay, that's the average assignment we give out. And when you're memorizing 180 verses, you can be excused for kind of losing the overall picture of what God is doing in that book, particularly in the books of Joshua and Judges, where there are some really horrifyingly interesting things going on. Particularly, I would say, I don't know if I could differentiate between the two. In the book of Joshua, the Israelites just slaughter everybody they meet. And in the book of Judges, they get beat up pretty badly and then slaughter back. And so there's just a lot of slaughter in the books of Joshua and Judges. And it's easy to lose the themes when you are tasked with memorizing the story of Gideon. You think you know the story of Gideon really well, and I'll bet you don't know it anywhere near as well as Ansel. There we go. So I have to keep track of who knows what story. And so I want to back up, and so I had the luxury because I'm writing questions for them, and I'm not really teaching them. I'm just facilitating at a very high level, testing whether they know the material. They're learning it for themselves, but because I'm looking at the whole span of these books of the Bible, I have the luxury of seeing things that they probably don't ever see, because I read something and I go, oh, look, God ends the story of this person this way, and then he tells another story and he ends that story the exact same way, and then he ends the next one and it ends the exact same way. Maybe that's important, but you don't see that when you're just looking at one story. So just to sink into the book of Judges for today. Maybe next time it'll be Joshua, but we're not going to get done with what I want to talk about today. So the 1st of March might be Judges again. I could talk about the book of Judges probably for an entire year, once a month. And there are great, fantastic themes in the book of Judges. But first of all, let's just kind of settle into this book. You could pull it up on your iPad or your phone if you want. The book of Judges was probably written by Samuel the prophet, who was also kind of the last in the line of judges, right? He's the one who the children of Israel complained to and said, but we want a king like everybody else. And he told them, no, you don't. And God told Samuel, yeah, go ahead, give him a king. And so Samuel was kind of the last in this long line of judges, and we think he wrote the book of Judges. And we think, and this part we know a little better, that it spans about 300 years of history for Israel. And if you really think about that, when we read the Bible sometimes, we have a different frame of reference for time. Because we think 300 years in biblical terms is really short. But if you think about it, think about America in the last 300 years. So go back to 1723 and think about all that's occurred in the span of 300 years in America. America in 1723 was just beginning to be a nation that was, I would say, coming of age. It was just beginning to be a nation that had an idea of who it was. And we've gone through the formation, through all kinds of division and splits and reframing of ourselves, and we're here and we're not done yet. And that's the way these 300 years were for the children of Israel. The book of Judges starts with Joshua dying. And what it does almost immediately after that, if you read chapters 1 and 2 and 3 of the book of Judges, what it does immediately after that is immediately dives in and it recites, not immediately in chapter 1, but pretty quickly thereafter, it goes through and it says, here's all the people of Canaan that the Israelites did not drive out. And it goes through and it lists them all. It says, this tribe was supposed to drive out these people and they didn't do it. This tribe was supposed to drive out these people, they didn't do it. And it goes on and on and on and on, right? Listing all these people that the children of Israel were supposed to drive out with the power of God, and they didn't do it. And then it kind of ends that section at the end of chapter 3, beginning of chapter 4, by saying, so the Lord decided to leave all those people there. Right? The children of Israel didn't do their job. They didn't hold up the covenant that they had with God. God said, I'm going to go before you and I'm going to drive all these people out. And they said, yeah, I don't know, man. I've been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years and those guys don't seem like they're all that bad. I think I've kind of subdued them enough that they're not going to bother me too much. I just want to start farming. I just want to start growing my own grapes and my own olive orchards, and I just want a normal life. And they didn't drive those people out. Imagine, there are a couple passages in the book of Judges which I tell people, imagine Middle East history today if God had gotten what he wanted back then. Because God told them flat out, he said, I don't want any of these people in this land. It's all yours. And they pretty much said, yeah, I don't know if we need it all. We're good. And thus begins the story of the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, at the end of the book of Judges, let's say Samuel is sitting here in his old age, closing this book. And the last phrase he writes is, the way the book of John ends is my favorite. Right? If all the things that Jesus did were written down, there wouldn't be enough books, libraries in the world or books in the world to contain it all. Right? That's my favorite ending. The book of Judges is maybe my second favorite because it says this at the end of the book of Judges. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It's like the human condition, right? It's libertarian Israel. It's leave me alone and let me do what I think is right. And so you have all these stories in the book of Judges of people just doing like the stuff they do. I mean, you go through it and you just go, what were they thinking? You know, and to be completely honest, almost every time I look at the nation of Israel or the protagonists of the story, and I go, it was them. It wasn't, you can't blame that on the Midianites. They were just a nomadic tribe who saw some land they wanted. You can't blame that on the Amalekites. They were behaving like the people they were. Why didn't these Israelites just do the right thing? And there's all kinds of fantastic stories that we could go. There's a lot of themes that we could go. But basically the Israelites God wanted to make this their land. He wanted to make a covenant with them that they would be his people in their land that he had provided for them. And they said, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we need that. I think we're good. By the way, the other thing that this is for the kids. I did some homework for you guys to make this an interesting talk for you guys. So the kids know this. It's a running joke now in the book of Joshua and Judges, both, but mostly in Judges. We think there were only 10 trees in all of Palestine because every important story says, and Gideon was threshing grain under the terebinth tree. And it's like the terebinth tree. What?
Actually threshing wheat in the wine press.
Oh, he was threshing wheat in the wine press. What did somebody do next to a terebinth tree? Give me an answer. Because it just seems like the story goes, and it's always the terebinth tree. Like there was only one, right? And so I'm visualizing Israel being this vast desert, and there are 10 trees, and everything important happens under one of those trees. Because sometimes they say the terebinth of Mamre, or the terebinth of such and such, Shiloh. Well, I did some homework for you guys, and I will tell you now that it's very likely that a terebinth tree is a pistachio tree. There you go. In the Bible translators that translate into English couldn't tell what kind of tree it was, so sometimes they call them oaks. But oaks are very, very, very unlikely to grow in this part of the world. And most scholars now, and there's a variety of a pistachio tree that is called Pistacia terebinthia. So they think they're pistachio trees. And one of the reasons why those trees survived and grew there was because they can tolerate salt in the water that they absorb. So they grow better next to the ocean. If you look at where they grow all the way around the Mediterranean in a circle right next to the water. So we think those might have been pistachio trees. It gives you a whole different picture of whomever sitting under the pistachio tree, making a covenant with somebody, or cooking a meal for an angel, or receiving an angel, or whatever they were doing. So there you go, guys. Now you know something about the book of Judges. By the way, David and Goliath fought in a place called the Valley of the Terebinths. So they fought in the place called the Valley of the Pistachios. There you go. Well, pistachio trees, not the nuts necessarily. Anyway, in Judges, we are presented with story after story of horribly flawed leaders. I'm trying to think if there's even one of them who starts the story well. Actually, the first judge of Israel was called Othniel, and he was Caleb's son. And we don't have any reason not to think he wasn't a good judge to begin with. So there's one. But other than that, the ones we hear the most about are horribly flawed from the very beginning. And I want to tell you, by the way, and Judges is the first book of the Bible, for those of you that this matters to, where the women come off way better than the men. Way better. So I'm going to give you some veiled references to stories in the book of Judges. And I want to see, the kids will get these right away. But there was a leader in the book of Judges who wouldn't go to battle unless he followed a woman. Who was it? Barak. That's right. There you go. Who was the woman? Deborah. This one's a little bit harder because you have to read a little bit of the story to realize this. This great leader in the book of Judges was probably the most timid leader in the Bible. He kept talking about himself to God as, I am the littlest man from the littlest family in the littlest tribe in the littlest nation on the littlest planet in the littlest universe ever. That's the way he described himself to God. God, why do you want me to go do this? I am little. Who was it? Gideon. That's right. So why do you think God took all his soldiers away and left him with only 300 people? There was a leader, this one's a tough one, who a woman killed him And as he was dying, he asked a man to kill him with a sword first so that he wouldn't have to say he died at the hands of a woman. Who was that? Abimelech, Gideon's son. See what I mean about the women? How about this? There was a leader who sacrificed his daughter in order to gain a military victory. Jephthah. There was a leader who broke just about every vow that was important in life and brought himself down completely for the sake of a woman. Samson. We all know that one, right? Delilah is one of the more famous women in the Bible, but she's not the only woman in his life. And we did not learn this for Bible Bowl because the leaders of Bible Bowl nationwide decided that this story was too horrific for anybody to learn. So they excluded it from Bible Bowl. But in this story, the entire nation of Israel decides to wipe out forever, completely, an entire tribe of Israel over a crime committed against a woman. It is a story that, it's a story. You can't make a movie out of that and have it be rated, for general audiences. Just can't happen. At the end of all these great judges, what you find is it's the same story over and over again. God intervenes. He intervenes in a way that only he can be glorified with a victory. And then it ends the story. It doesn't end the story by saying, and the people came back and worshiped the Lord for the next 80 years. All it says is, and the land had rest for 40 years or for 80 years or however long. And I find that interesting because every story ends that very same way. And I wonder if that was an important point that Samuel was making, was it's not that the people necessarily saw what God did and turned back to him and re-entered the covenant. It's the land had rest until the next nomadic tribe came and wiped them out. And I want to spend a minute, because to me there are some themes in this book, and I want to spend a minute on the story of Jephthah, which is the second most horrific story in the book of Judges. And I'm gonna tell you this story. You can look it up. It's Judges 11, something like that. Jephthah, something like that. He takes a couple chapters. I'm going to selectively tell you this story, but you can look it up, 11 and 12 or 10 and 11, something like that. But this is the story of the most ridiculous vow ever taken, in my humble opinion. So Jephthah was the illegitimate son of somebody. He starts off life on the wrong foot. He starts off life, and back in those days, his father had lots of sons by his legitimate wife. And so once the father dies, the sons all say, you're not legitimate, you can't be part of this family, you can't be part of this inheritance. And so they send Jephthah away. And in the Bible it says, and Simon can help me with this, Jephthah basically decided to associate with what kind of men? Worthless men. That's the word the Bible uses. And Jephthah associated with worthless men. He was an outcast, hanging out with hooligans and thugs. But he was probably a pretty good street fighter. And what ends up happening is an enemy of Israel arises and causes an existential crisis in Israel. And all of his brothers come back to him and they go, sorry, you know how to fight and you have lots of worthless men in your posse. Will you come lead us in battle and lead us to victory? And he basically makes them take a vow to him that if he wins against Ammon, was it Ammon? Yeah, Ammon. If he wins, then they will make him king over them. So he was like, I'm not risking the fact that I might go to war, I might die, and if I win, you guys will just throw me back out in the streets again. I demand you take a vow that if I win, I will become king over you. And they say, yeah, fine, whatever. So Jephthah says, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try peace talks. And he goes and he talks to the king of Ammon, and he basically says, why are you threatening my territory? And the king of Ammon says, because it's mine, it's not yours, give it back. By the way, this is Gaza and Israel and Palestine and Israel today. If you want to read that in ancient Hebrew, it's the exact same negotiation, almost the exact same lines of logic. So Jephthah goes on and he recites this whole history of, well, we own this land because when we came out of Egypt and we came up here, we tried to go through Edom, and we tried to go through Moab, and we tried to go through Sidon, and we tried to go through all these places, and these kings wouldn't let us do it. They were mean to us, so we beat them and took their land. And it's ours, and we've been living here now for however many years. How long had they been living there here? It was that you might not know. How many? 300 years. 300 years. We've been living here for 300 years. And why didn't you come try and take it before if it was really yours? You had the chance. It was yours in the beginning. We took it from you. If you really thought it was yours, you should have come and taken it sooner. And it says the king ignored him. So war is inevitable. So Jephthah goes home, and now he realizes he's got to do what he's got to do. And he decides to take a vow to the Lord. This is a fairly common thing in this time. If you want the Lord to do something great for you, if you want to call him to do something incredibly mighty for you, you say, Lord, I'm going to make a vow to you. I'm going to do this if you do that. And Jephthah talks to the Lord and he says, if you will enable me to win this victory, when I come back, the first thing that comes out of my house to greet me, I will sacrifice as a burnt offering to you. It does say burnt offering. Am I getting it right, Simon? All right, thank you. He knows it better than I do. So Jephthah goes off. He wins an incredible victory. It says he captures 20 towns of the enemy, sends them packing out into the deserts. And he comes home, and the first thing that comes out of his door to greet him is his daughter. His unmarried, still living at home daughter. And by the way, Jephthah shouldn't have been surprised at this, because it would have been customary for a victor coming back from a victorious battle to have a parade of women coming out to hail them. If you think about when David and Saul were competing with each other, and the women would sing, what was the song they would sing? Saul has slain his thousands, David his 10,000s. Right? Not surprising. A woman's going to come out of his house to greet him. What was he thinking? And he basically immediately says, oh no. And he tells his daughter, I made this vow to the Lord and I can't break it. I have to keep it. The Lord kept his side, now I got to keep mine. And the Hollywood version of the ending of this story is the daughter is, so this part is true in all endings. The daughter is gracious and says, no, you're right, Dad. You can't break your vow. Let me go off into the hills and celebrate the end of my youth with my girlfriends, and then I'll come back and you do what you have to do. The Hollywood ending of this story is that Jephthah in the end committed her to a nunnery. She wasn't married, and so the sacrifice that he made was that he sacrificed her virginity, which is her unmarriedness, because it says very specifically in the passage that she was unmarried, right? That Jephthah somehow fulfilled this oath by sending her off to be a Vestal virgin or a nun or whatever the equivalent was at that time. But I will tell you that when Jephthah recites the vow, he says, I will make this a burnt offering. Micah's looking it up now. He's going to test me. I see him. Because Mike and I have had this debate in Next Gen Sabbath School. He would like the Hollywood ending to be true. Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all? I mean, yeah, oh, please don't make a burnt offering of her. Send her off to a nunnery. And I'm like, how is that better? I mean, it's better, but how is it a lot better? You know, I mean, this father basically alters the course of his daughter's life so that he gets to win a great victory and become king. How is that better? And I'm sitting there going, if there was ever a moment, ever in the history of time, for there to be a mulligan on a vow, that would be it. Right? For those of you that play golf, you know, you hit a really bad tee shot and, you know, all right, well, you get one of those around, you can do it again. That's called a mulligan, right? We'd like to give Jephthah a mulligan and say, all right, Jephthah, change the vow, right? Talk to God and say, God, I was stupid. I take all the blame. Instead of sacrificing my daughter's life to you, you know, either virtually or physically, I'll give you this instead. It's not the way the story ends. Sorry. And by the way, if you want to see a really horrific vow, the last 2 chapters of Judges, which the kids don't have to learn, thank goodness. When all the nations of Israel, they make a vow that basically says, we're going to wipe out the tribe of Benjamin. There will be nothing left. It's gone. They make this vow without consulting God. They just make it a bunch of dudes with swords, hopped up on steroids, going, hey, let's make a vow. Let's wipe out the tribe of Benjamin. Because they did this horrible thing. And then they do it, and there's only 600 men left in the tribe of Benjamin, and they realize, maybe we went too far. So they recalibrate the vow. They go, okay, how can we fulfill the vow in exactly the words that we use, stated it, but not in a way that actually wipes out the tribe of Benjamin? And they go through this whole logic in the book of Judges. You got to read it. It's fantastic how people talk themselves out of something. They talk themselves into, if we do this instead of that, then the tribe of Benjamin can survive, and we will have technically met the terms of our vow. And that's what they do. That one's kind of interesting because in that one, when they make their initial oath, they make it without talking to the Lord. And then they get ready to go up to battle, and then they decide to consult the Lord. So they're all ready to go to battle to wipe out the tribe of Benjamin, and they consult the Lord, and they say, which of the tribes should go first? Which of the other 11 tribes should be the first into the breach in the battle? And it's kind of interesting because it's very presumptuous to approach the Lord and say, we've already decided to go into battle, and we're asking you which tribe should go first. So the Lord says Judah should go first. And Judah goes up and gets waxed. I mean, they get brutalized by the tribe of Benjamin. Then they decide, we're going to ask the Lord the question a little bit differently the next time. So they ask it a little differently. The Lord gives them another vague answer, which does not condone their actions. And they go, okay, good, we're good this time. And they go up to battle again, and they get waxed again. Just, right? And the third time they go, maybe the Lord didn't want us to do this. And the third time the Lord says, this time, go up, because I'm gonna take care of it for you. Very, very, very interesting, this whole thing. And I got to tell you, it would be very easy to say, why are these guys making these stupid vows and oaths? Why are they doing this? Well, I'll tell you that in that time, vows and oaths were very important. I want to read to you some passages from the Bible. God values vows. Numbers 30. Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of Israel, saying, "This is what the Lord has commanded. If a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word." You make a stupid vow or a stupid pledge, tough luck on you. Job 22. You will make your prayer to him and he will hear you and you will pay your vows. Solomon, Ecclesiastes 5. When you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fools are people who make a vow to God and do not fulfill it. And not only that, but don't fulfill it promptly. He says, fulfill your vow. It is better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. The psalmist, whoever that was, because different ones were written by different people. Psalm 76, make your vows to the Lord. Make your vows to the Lord your God and perform them. Let all around him bring gifts to him who is feared. The psalmist says it over and over again. He says, I fulfill my vows every day. So it would be very easy for us to look at the book of Judges and say, well, the best thing here would have been for Jephthah not to make a vow. The best thing in the book of Judges would be for the children of Israel not to make a vow that basically entailed them wiping out their brother. The best thing is just not to make a vow. We live in a time where vows are not probably as important, right? Either a vow can be modified, or why make a vow? It's just a lot of drama, right? It's a lot of drama to go to somebody and have to make a pledge or a promise and have to, make a big ceremony of it and I'm going to fulfill this. It's a lot easier. I deal with a lot of people in business from the South. And in the South, every conversation I ever have about formalizing a business arrangement is, we don't need a contract. I am a man of my word or a woman of my word, right? If I shake your hand and say I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it, right? Which I love because I would like to think that I am that person too. I would like to think that I am a person of integrity, and if I tell you I'm going to do it, then I'm going to do it. But there are a lot of people in the world that don't. I see it far more times than I see the positive, I see the negative. Where somebody says, oh, we don't need to write this down. Just send me an email and tell me that says what we agreed, and then I'll have the email and you'll have the email. And if anything ever goes wrong, we can look back at the email and remember what we agreed. And then you find yourself in court because some lawyer has taken that email and said, well, it wasn't explicit about this, and it's the tribes saying, well, how can we save the tribe of Benjamin and still fulfill our oath? How can we cut the corner? By the way, that's Greg Constantino's not in the room, but in my humble opinion, in business contract law, the courts are full of people who are cutting corners on each other. It's never about black and white. It's never the contract says this and you didn't do it, therefore you need to do it. It's, well, the contract says that, but it doesn't say I couldn't do this, and that's what you go to court over. And so in this day and age, isn't it better just to either get a lawyer, write a contract, or just not make a promise at all? Just not make a vow. I will tell you that I think if you go through the vowing in the Bible, you'll find that generally speaking, it's a beautiful thing. The first vow we have recorded in the Bible is when Jacob is fleeing from Esau, and he's out in the middle of the desert at night, and he puts a stone down for his pillow, and the Lord comes to talk to him. And that's in Genesis 28. And at the end of it, the next morning he gets up and he builds a little pillar of stone. He pours oil over it. And he says, this is, he calls it Bethel, right? Beth, house, El, God, the house of God. He says, I'm calling this place Bethel because this is the house of God, because this last night is the place where God and I made a vow. And I told God that if he would bless me and he would take me to the place I'm going and he would protect me and he would give me food and he would give me safety, he asked for a few things from God, then I will make that God my God. I will make God my God, and I will tithe. This is not just a free vow. This is not something where my words are the cost. The cost is I'm gonna do something that costs me. A vow isn't a vow unless there's mutual consideration. Both sides give something up. Vows there's a beautiful symmetry to vows in the Bible. But version 2 of this talk, maybe March 3, Jesus in Matthew 5. We're very familiar with the passage that says if you look at another woman, you've committed adultery, right? If you hate somebody, if you look at somebody with hate in your heart, you've murdered them. We almost never refer to the passage that comes next where Jesus says, don't make an oath. Just don't do it. And you would think that God had changed. That God was saying, yeah, that was the old God, this is the new God. It's not what Jesus is saying at all. It's not what Jesus is saying at all. And we'll talk about that the next time. But for this time, I want to tell you, the end of this story for today is that God values making vows. He values oaths. He values this process. If you stand back from the book of Genesis through Judges and even into Kings and Samuel, and you look at all these vows being made, they're solemn things. They occur at very specific places. I did entitle this talk, The Watchtower, because the Hebrew word for watchtower is mizpah. Mizpah. And some of you might think, oh, I know that word. Where does that word come from? When I grew up in the New York area, and I was surrounded by Catholics and Jews. And there's a special thing called a mizpah, a piece of jewelry, that when you and your girlfriend are going to go away from each other for the summer, you give her half and she keeps the other half. And on it is written a text that says, the Lord be with thee while we are absent one from another. It's a mizpah. But the word mizpah means watchtower. And if you look at the pattern and the symmetry of these vows, they occur at very specific places. I ask you sometime to read the book of Judges all the way through and into Samuel. Even in the day of Samuel, when Samuel calls the people together to choose a king, he calls them together at a certain place. It is called Mizpah. Over and over again, the people of Israel meet at this place called Mizpah, and they make vows. And part of the reason they do is because in God's view, when you make a vow, he's in the middle of it. He is the watchtower. That's what happens when you make a vow. God places importance on vows. He is prepared to fulfill his part of a vow that you make. He's prepared to bless a life that's dedicated to him in discipleship and ready to take the cost of being a disciple. He is prepared to bless a lifelong marriage, for better or for worse. By the way, I went to my nephew's wedding recently, and they had changed that vow. And I thought it was kind of interesting. They made that vow in good times and in not so good times. I thought that was kind of funny. It's like, please don't use a negative word in my wedding. Let's have it be not so good instead of bad, right? God is prepared to be part of that vow. He is prepared to say, if you make that vow and I am the watchtower of it and I am standing in the middle of it, I will do my part if you do yours. When you make a vow that says, I want to raise the children that come into my household in your name, God is willing to be in that vow and to do his part. By the way, one of the most famous vows in the Bible, Hannah. Give me a son. and I will give him back to you. God values your vows, not just because it says in the Bible that you're supposed to. He values your vows because when God fulfills his part of your vow, he gets the glory. When you make a wedding vow and you say, I will be faithful to this person for the rest of my life, Lord, if you do your part, you witness this, you stand as the Watchtower here, you are a witness for the rest of your life to people who can't get that right. You are a witness for the rest of your life to people who go, how in the world did you stay married? I do not get it. It's just too easy to not make that vow. Or it's too easy to make it and then say, yeah, I didn't say I wouldn't get divorced. I just said I'd stay married. Or make it something that's not what was intended. So I pray to you today and for you that you realize that you are called to be people that make vows. You are called to stand in the presence of God with your fellow community members, with your spouses, praying over your kids, committing your life to God. You are called to stand next to the Watchtower and make a vow. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we're not worthy of your great miracles in our lives. We're not worthy of what you could do for us. But we are blessed and we are humbled by the fact that you promised to do those things for us. When we make these vows with you as a witness that are in your name and that you bless, that you were part of forming and shaping, you will do miraculous things for us. And we praise you, Lord, for being the God who is a watchtower and in our lives. I bless these people today as they go out. Help them to be people who carry you out to the rest of the world. The rest of the world who might not realize what a powerful watchtower, what a guardian, what a miracle worker you can be in people's lives, and that their lives will illustrate that to others. I ask this in your name. Amen.